Hi, coming on filter free in a place of authenticity because I wanted to share a little reflection on patriarchy, matriarchy, and yesterday's pagan and pantheist play dates, because it has definitely inspired some thoughts about community and society and what the people who say the feminine, divine feminine rising is coming, the old gods are coming back. That's a problem. We'll talk about that another time. But and down with the patriarchy, and we need to return to this more matriarchal society because women would never. And I love this discourse because it's actually needs a little more nuance and discernment. My 2 words from this year that is very necessary everywhere. But also, I think it needs some redefinitions and redefining and specificity to it to actually become a sort of actionable plan. So many people understand what the patriarchy is. Whether or not they agree it's a bad thing, they know that when someone says patriarchy, what that means. That means man-centered. It means rules and law and logic and evidence and credentials. But that was patriarchy light. We are in patriarchy advanced, which is now inextricably tied up with end-stage capitalism, entropic economic policy, and primarily white supremacy. You cannot separate the two, which is something Black women and Indigenous women have been telling us forever. We haven't listened. You cannot separate the fight. You cannot be a feminist, just a feminist, and not anti-racist. If you're a feminist who doesn't see color, I invite you to start unpacking some of that, because that is how we made so many steps forward and then went all the way back because we ignored the voices of marginalized communities. And so that is another whole video. But so we have the patriarchy. But what is matriarchy? If hypothetically everybody decided that patriarchy, they all agreed patriarchy is bad. This is not working. Let's switch to matriarchy. What is it? What is matriarchy? Are we just copying and pasting in a different font because women would never? Or is it something that we need to actually define in response to the real issues, to the real lived experiences of the people in the planet that are currently inhabiting? So I find that a lot of people who want the matriarchy back, if they have a limited exposure to, like, say, sociological education or anthropology or anything like that, or even to just reading books on historical research in general, which is my background, they'll romanticize matriarchy, and they have this idea that there was a before time, before patriarchy. And sometimes they'll misplace it into early recorded history. So say Babylon and ancient Egypt and Greek and Rome. And now this caveat being my sphere of study was Europe, the Maghreb, which is that northern Africa area, and sort of the Mediterranean, and a little bit of the Middle East. I was not an Eastern Asian or an African or South American, South or Central American specialist. I have some courses there because outside of there are exceptions, but whitewashing of history has eliminated sources to allow myself access and study in that, but they're finding more now. So this is back when I was in school. So this is just applying to a more specific region of the world that seems to have taken over the Western and known planet by, colonization and all that bullshit. So, there are other stories. Just saying. But back to the romanticized matriarchy. They'll be like, they had Ishtar, they had Inanna, they had Isis, they had Hathor, goddesses that represented power, and the men couldn't rule without the blessing of these goddesses. And it's like, You know that was the start of patriarchy. Written word has documented the start of patriarchy. It was not a matriarchy. Yes, it was maybe a little more balanced in that women could hold power in certain positions, but for the most part, no. Women had these were the exceptions, because patriarchy didn't just knock them off their pedestals and destroy everything. They had to court them first, court the way, play diplomat before force could be used. And archaeological evidence, pre-written history, shows fertility cults and goddess worship. And of course, we know that the very first calendars ever made, the thing that gave us recorded time, was by women. Because who else would need a calendar if you weren't in an agricultural society? Why would you need a calendar? Hint, it has to do with monthly flow. So why would you need a calendar? That's why. So the first calendars come from that. So the closest we have to a matriarchal understanding of that, and also the new research, that the new discoveries that prove and show that the grandmother was the greatest hunter in the hunter-gatherer societies. They're the ones that actually taught the younger generations, male and female, but it was mostly grandmothers, not grandfathers, that taught how to hunt, the masculine skills. So we know that matriarchy was possible, existed, and it seems like agriculture and written history has implemented and supported the rise of patriarchy. So they're dreaming of a time where women had roles of power and access to roles of power, which patriarchy created roles of power, and only few initiated, credentialed, proven, well-born, of a certain bloodline. You see where I'm going? That's patriarchy, whether or not it's for women or men. That's patriarchy. So, that provides all that. So a lot of people will romanticize it and don't want to go back to that. They want to go to the roles they have power. And that brings me to the idea that people who want, there's a good portion of people who want matriarchy, not because they want to heal the world per se, but more so because patriarchy doesn't allow them to have the roles they want. There was another creator on here, and I don't remember who it was, so I'm sorry. And if you see this on the off chance, in my little tiny bubble in the world, please comment and be like, that was me, who said, you don't hate the church, you want to run the church. And that is so freaking common in the spiritual community. They'll go about the trauma of the religious trauma of being raised a Christian or in the Judeo-Christian tradition and doctrine, and they swing so far from it. But they're not that far. They won't deconstruct, because it's not why they got trauma. They got trauma because they were told they couldn't be a priest. They couldn't be a bishop. They couldn't be pope. And it's the same thing with a big group of people saying they want matriarchy. They don't want it to do better for the world, for everybody. They want it to do better for women, so women can do all the things that men have been doing. Because guess what? The horrors inflicted upon the world were done by human beings. And yes, it catered and favored white men right now. But and white women thinking they're not going to do that? Meanwhile, we have weaponized white women tears. White women have been the bane of the existence for black women for a very long time. We have been the sole deciding factor of keeping people from true freedom for a very long time. So so we need to really work on defining that, and I'm already at time. So I'm going to go part 2 in just a bit. See you in part 2.